This is the Energy Makers Show, featuring the innovators, financiers, and policymakers focused on the global energy demand. Brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And here's your host, Paul Dickerson.
Hi, I'm Paul Dickerson, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. First up, Troy Thacker, CEO of R360 Environmental Solutions, a company experiencing some tremendous growth cleaning up the oil field. Next up, we hear from Blake Randolph with the accounting firm of BKD, sharing his predictions and assessment of some of these energy subsidies. All that right after this.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome to another episode of the Energy Makers Show. We have with us today Troy Thacker, CEO of R360 Environmental Solutions. Troy, great to have you on the program.
Paul, thanks for having me.
So tell us about R360.
Sure. R360 is the nation's largest oilfield waste management company. So what that means is that we manage all of the different waste products that are produced when you drill for or you produce hydrocarbons. So when you drill an oil or gas well, you create drill cuttings, you use the drilling muds, and so they're spent muds. All of those need to go to third-party waste providers like ourselves. And then separately, when you produce hydrocarbons, you produce a lot of water. That water needs to be disposed of in professional disposal sites. And then finally, we do reclamation work. So if there's been an oil spill on the ground, or if there's an old production site that is getting cleaned up, we take all of those waste products and take them back to our sites where we recycle them and try to turn them into usable products.
Well, and let's talk about the water. What quantities of water were you talking about?
Well, when you produce hydrocarbons in the U.S., on average, there's about 7 barrels of water that are produced for every barrel of hydrocarbons.
It's a lot of water.
It is a lot of water, and that water needs to be disposed of in friendly places or recycled. And
right.
That's one of our main objectives is to recycle water. It's also to recycle the solids or the solid waste that is generated when you either reclaim an oil and gas site, or when you drill for oil, the cuttings that come out of the earth. We can recycle the water, reuse that water as either wash water on our own sites, or over time we intend to be able to bring that water back for refracking purposes, or deliver it back as a 10-pound brine for drilling purposes. The solids, on the other hand, are quite fascinating. We have a proprietary process that we can take those solids and recycle them and make roads out of them.
Wow.
And in fact, last year we were the second largest recycler in the state of Texas, recycling roads predominantly down in South Texas that the Texas Department of Transportation has put down.
Well, and roads that need some work. I've been out on these, and your truck needs to be fairly high to avoid getting damaged.
Well, and as you know, oil field traffic tears up roads.
That's right.
The big heavy trucks running back and forth on the same roads day in and day out tear up those roads, and particularly down in South Texas where the roads are narrow. You need to widen those roads and make them better, and that's what we've been doing.
Well, and your company's had some pretty incredible growth. Can you share with us a little bit about why that is and what's been occurring?
Sure. The name R360 really came about just a little over 2 years ago. Our company was formed by acquiring simultaneously 4 different businesses around the U.S., 4 regional players in our business. And since then, we've gone on to buy 4 additional companies. We're now a combination of eight different businesses. That has been part of the growth, but another part of the growth is our main customers, the big oil and gas companies, wanting to standardize and wanting to have a best practices leader that they choose for their environmental services.
Well, it's an exciting time right now in the oil field.
It absolutely is. Post the BP Macondo disaster, the urgency with which the oil and gas companies are addressing their environmental concerns has stepped up tenfold. That, coupled with just the fact that oil is at $100 and activity is through the roof at the moment, means that we're busy. And many of the sites that we operate that might have been small sites in the past, we've expanded 5- and 10-fold in some cases. We're also opening new sites and constantly looking for new sites to acquire to continue to build our business.
Well, and you're hearing more about, certainly the federal government looking to regulate the industry in certain ways. It sounds like you're able to solve some of those problems.
Sure, regulations certainly drive our customers' behaviors. Of course, what we're after is stable regulations. Sure. So our customers know what they need to do, and so we know how to manage our customers' waste products. We take those waste products back to our sites, and like I said a moment ago, we recycle as much as we possibly can. And those regulations drive our customers bringing the material to us.
Well, and then you have several revenue streams, right? I would imagine they're happy to have those roads. They're happy to be able to not have to pay for additional water out in the field to be able to recycle, and they're just happy to get rid of it.
That's right. We are paid to take the waste. Once we receive that waste, we process that waste. We take the contaminants out. We get rid of the contaminants, and we make a recyclable or reusable material. So we get paid on the front end, and of course we get paid when we sell a recycled product on the back end. In addition, one of the things that we've been doing to help drive our business is adding additional services. So we can provide services back to the rig site or back to the production site, which allows us to manage the waste from cradle to grave. From the very second that the waste is generated, we'll manage it in an environmentally friendly way. And as we like to think about it, all of the products and all of the times that waste is touched, there's a chance for spillage. There's a chance for environmental harm. And so our goal has been to bring products and services out that minimize the number of times that you handle the waste and maximize the safety of the waste as it's being transported across the road and back to our facilities.
Now, is your vision for this to be a U.S. domestic only service company? Do you have international growth plans?
We certainly do intend to take the business international, but at the moment there are countless opportunities here just in the United States.
Why fly over money to make money?
That's exactly right. As the shale plays have emerged in the U.S., as unconventional hydrocarbons have emerged, all of the major oil and gas companies have come back to the U.S. And those companies have a higher environmental standard that they wish to achieve. Sure. And that is providing us with the opportunity here in the U.S. And why go elsewhere when there's such tremendous opportunities here? So.
Now, with all that growth, how do you as the CEO plan to meet those needs as a company? You're of a certain size. How do you project you'll look 5 years from now?
Well, we project that we'll be in all the major hydrocarbon basins in the U.S. Okay. And we've achieved many of those today, but not all of them. In addition, we expect that we will expand within those basins. We have anchor sites within many basins around the U.S., but we need additional sites to help minimize the trucking cost. And again, trucking, as far as we're concerned, is a necessary evil. It's how you move the waste across the road and get it to a recycling center. But if we can take those recycling centers out to the field, then it makes it even better for our customers. So.
Well, and you've got an interesting background. You didn't just grow up on the back of a rig. You grew up on the investor side of the equation and have made the move. Can you tell us a little bit about that move, how it's been, any lessons learned?
Sure. You're right. I spent many years being a private equity investor, investing in energy companies. It was 2 years in the making, the thesis behind what is R360. Recognition that the environmental services industry was changing, that the energy industry domestically was changing, and trying to take advantage of those trends. As we brought the different businesses together, it became natural for me to step in and lead the business. And it has been quite a transition for me personally. Being on the investor side, you look at many different opportunities in a given month or even in a given week. Being at the helm of a business, you're focused only on your customers' opportunities.
You are all in.
All in, and your projects and your focus are quite different, but it's quite rewarding and a lot of fun.
Well, it's exciting. Congratulations on the success, and thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And that concludes our discussion with Troy Thacker. We'll be back with more right after this.
Where will the energy come from to move us forward? From natural sources in abundant supply, or perhaps a man-made source? At NRG, we believe innovation will solve our energy needs. That's why NRG is moving away from fossil fuels towards wind, solar, and other sustainable technologies to power the smart grid, the electric car, and our clean energy future. We're using all of our energy to develop more of it.
This is the Energy Makers Show, brought to you by NRG, moving clean energy forward. And now, back to the Energy Makers Show with your host, Paul Dickerson.
Welcome back to the Energy Makers Show. My guest now, Blake Randolph, head of energy at the accounting firm of BKD. Blake, great to have you on the program.
Paul, how are you doing? Thanks for having me here.
So tell us about BKD.
Well, we're the 10th largest accounting firm in the country and have an office here in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, middle of the U.S., and I run our energy practice.
What size is the firm?
We've got about 1,900 employees, about $407 million in revenue. We're in 12 states, 36 offices. So been around 80 years. So,
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, as the accountant in the room, there's been a lot of debate and talk about big oil and gas companies, the incentives that they've received for years, and possibly looking to take away some of those incentives. Can you share with our viewers what's the debate really about, and what's the take?
Well, the big debate is losing the depletion deduction, losing the amortization of G&G, geological, geophysical costs, the amortization of that. Basically, just making it a lot tougher for these guys to have the cash to drill wells, because it takes cash to drill wells, and paying more taxes up front, there's less cash to drill wells.
So it's strictly around depreciation?
Well, the IDC deduction, intangible drilling costs, is a big front-end deduction where
Sure.
you take these big risks, you deduct the cost of your IDC. If you didn't have that deduction, it'd be a hard time pressed just to have the cash to drill wells.
So what's the impact then on some of these companies?
Yeah, well, let's first, the business is very entrepreneurial, and a lot of these exploration companies are privately financed with banks' money or independents' money.
Right.
And it's all about cash flow. So they lose IDC deduction, Paul. That means they take huge risk when they drill wells. They may spend $10 million to drill one well, and if it's not successful, all they have is a hole in the ground.
Yep.
And if they're not allowed to deduct those IDCs, intangible drilling costs, as incurred, then he can only spend $7 million on the well because $3 million is going to taxes. Yeah. So you can see there's less cash available to drill the well. And the proposals would require capitalizing those costs, amortizing them over the productive life of the well, but that really distorts cash flow. And so these programs these independents have, sometimes they're very aggressive. They want to drill up every dollar they have.
Right.
And I'd have to tell them to stop drilling because you're going to run out of money.
It's a big impact.
It's a very big impact. And it's an impact on our ability to produce hydrocarbons in the U.S.
Absolutely.
And enjoy them.
So here we are, a nation wanting to produce more at home, and these incentives were put in place to enable that, yet now we're looking to take them away.
Well, Paul, I think most people, if you surveyed them, would want pretty cheap gasoline prices at the pump.
Sure.
And so by encouraging these people to take these big risks and find oil, say, right, you got to give them the incentive. And that's what it does. If you take the incentive away, everybody's gasoline price is probably going to go up because there's going to be less money for exploration.
And less supply.
And less supply.
Well, so what's your prediction?
I predict it's going to be an election fight. We'll see. I mean, Mitt Romney's plan, some other Republicans, the White House just issued, our administration just issued the 2013 budget that recalls for a repeal of all of these, as well as other incentives on the hydrocarbon-based energy business.
Do you have some sense of the quantity of dollars we're talking about?
Billions.
All right.
Billions and billions and billions.
Each year?
Every year. Yep. Each year, every year. That's right.
Well, incredible. Now, I know you represent many of the portfolio companies of venture firms and private equity firms. For our viewers, can you walk us through what you're seeing in that investor space?
Well, we see private equity has a big interest in energy, and that's broken down. What we see is oilfield services, E&P, exploration and production, and more of the midstream side of the business.
Right.
We don't really see them that much in the downstream side, but I'm sure they're there. I just don't see it. But certainly in the midstream, where the build-outs needed, pipelines, all sorts of storage, gathering systems that are needed as the shale plays continue to develop, and now we're seeing more, strategy liquids-rich shale plays, which is needing, more transportation taken off the wet liquids, pipelines for the liquids, and the Eagle Ford and the other shales.
Now, tell me what you're seeing offshore.
Offshore, we've got some clients investing in the deep and ultra-deep Gulf of Mexico, and the moratorium is going to be lifted, and drilling is now continuing on some wells that were halted, so that's pretty exciting seeing that. Onshore, it's very exciting. I mean, not onshore, but on the shelf, the continental shelf, it's very exciting. The last lease sale went very well.
Talk about that.
Well, the lease sale, I can't remember the numbers, are over $300 million at OGS or MMS sold, and so there's some independents coming in back into the shelf, but there's also some big activity in the shelf. I don't know if you read about the McMoran Deep Davy Jones well, the Wilcox well, 34,000 feet, and that could mean a super deep, not so much in deep water, but I think revitalizing the activity in the Gulf of Mexico is really pretty exciting.
Well, and as the administration's looking at producing more at home, clearly offshore oil production is a big part of that. When do you think that we'll begin to see some of that oil in the market?
Well, the projects started off the third and fourth quarter of 2011, and as terrible as the Macondo tragedy was with BP, it shows there's a lot of oil down there in those deep water plays.
Right.
And we believe that that there'll be a lot of so I say third, fourth quarter of 2012, you'll start seeing more come on and significantly reduce our imports.
Well, and walk us through from your perspective, when you see that $100 a barrel oil, how does that affect the market?
Well, I think it does several things. It reduces consumption in the U.S., which that's good.
Right.
We reduce consumption. It also, the shift from gas to oil to liquids type strategies increases our production, which is, I believe, increased over 800,000 barrels a year from a couple of years ago. So that whole thing actually reduces our imports by reducing consumption and increasing domestic supply. So it reduces our imports.
Now, I know you do work not only in the U.S., but certainly overseas. We've seen what's happened in the U.S. when it comes to natural gas and shale. What are your predictions when it comes to Europe?
Well, we work a lot with companies in Europe and also West Africa. So there's kind of two things going on there. One is the potential emergence of shale plays in Europe, but also, Europe is very alternative energy focused, and I work with some of the big firms in Germany. You talk to them, all they want to talk about is wind power.
Right.
And a high percentage of their power comes from wind, and so it's government backed. It's part of their culture. It's wind coming off the North Sea and other parts, and it's very exciting too seeing that. And these natural gas plays develop. But I think the problem with Europe is it's since the landowners don't own the minerals, nobody wants a drilling rig in their backyard. You want a drilling rig in your backyard if you own the minerals.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem, because the state owns the minerals, and I think it's going to continue to have a lot of political pressure over there to develop onshore minerals in Europe.
Well, Blake, thank you so much for coming in today. Very informative.
Thank you.
And that wraps this episode of the Energy Makers Show, heard on the radio nationwide and seen right here at TheEnergyMakers.com. I'm Paul Dickerson, and we'll see you next week.